We're still asking the same question. Could you see today in those words? The second verse especially resonates with me, which says, Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Be the change you wish to see in the world. We all know who wrote that, Mahatma Gandhi. I think it's trite. I find it overused. And I apologize when I may appear trite. But today, as we review our Black History Month together, I want to consider if we indeed, you, me, us, if we have what it takes to be agents of change. To usher in the change in our small corner of the world here in the Southwest, maybe just at our church, in our homes, in our own lives, in our neighborhoods, our state, and our world. Truth be told, who was here last week, a slam poet, made a very powerful statement, I understand. I wasn't here. On Sunday before he shared his poetic soul, he said this: "From what I have already seen here this morning, if all places were like this, there would be no need for this poem." I thought that was a pretty amazing, and there's my dog. I thought that was amazing, profound statement that Truth Be Told shared. And it makes me wonder if we really realize how much we've grown together as a community of faith over the last at least 5 years since I've been here. We have changed. We have become a changing community in a world that is constantly changing. Are we there yet? Of course not. So I sat down with one of our ex-moderators yesterday for a cup of coffee at Starbucks with Greg Essemacher, who was the president or moderator in our community, the First Church, the first year I was here, excuse me, and also the moderator in my fourth and fifth year here at First Church. We sat at Starbucks and we recounted how much healthier First Church, thank you, is, and how we have come a long way. And the strange work of the Spirit that brings just the right people at just the right time. And he also made me promise to see it through to the end, that I would not leave before this transformation is completed. So we agreed, and I'm making a public announcement to you, as Greg is sitting toward the back with his son, that together we have been a part of the change that we are hoping to see in our world as First Church has found its place and its voice inside and outside these doors. And Greg and I commented on how much we don't know where the next leg of the journey is going to take us. And I'm not somebody that doesn't like to be able to see beyond the immediate moment. I like to be a visionary and I like to see ahead. But you know, in an ever-changing world, it's really difficult. And it's somewhat of a mystery where we will be going as a community of faith. The one thing that I know is that we are not stagnant. The new folks that join today, as I've said before, they will change us. Whoever walks in today will actually change us because it changes the mix. It changes the culture, your energy and what you bring to this community. Jim Rohn said this: "Your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change." So we are together in this place. And together we can indeed be the change that we wish to see in the world, because it's really challenging to go on that journey of change alone. So where is the power to live into change? Where is the power, and what is that power that brings change to our lives and change to our community and change to our world? And who is the power that will bring change to our community and to our lives? Of course, as a Christian community, we believe it's the power of God and the power of God's Spirit that is in all of us. And hopefully now at the end of our Black History Month, we can all agree that Jesus was not some sort of white Messiah, but rather a brown-skinned, brown-eyed, dark-skinned Palestinian Jew. But my question this morning: how has this series helped us to reimagine Jesus. To reimagine our understanding of Jesus, to reimagine our understanding of his culture and our culture, his life and our life, his ministry and our ministry. Has it helped change our understanding of the world? And has it helped us change our way of being in the world? In other words, how has this journey helped you to find ways to be the change you want to see in the world? Does anybody have a short response to that? How has the series over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks helped you? Anybody? Enlightenment? Forgiveness? To be proud of where you came from. Amen. Peacefulness? Anybody in the choir? Change is possible? Knowledge? Truth? Gil? Power to the people. Gil, what were you going to say? Oh, okay. Pointing to the picture. Expanding your cultural comfort zone. Very well said. Stretching. Love. Oh, Jesus has a grittiness that makes him more relatable now. Very well said. Not that the rest of you weren't well said. You were all well said. And to be honest, in many ways, the series has changed me. I had a chance to speak some of my truths that I've held for a number of years, but was not sure that a lot of spiritual communities could handle those truths. Did I share with a little bit of fear and intrepidation? Of course. But you assured me, as you went out on Sunday mornings, you can even give us more, Pastor. So I've also sensed that in my life as a minister and as a social worker, I've always been one that wants to push the envelope. I want to challenge myself and I want to challenge others to see things in a new way and to live into the gift of transformation. So Martin Luther King said, "The difference between a dreamer and a visionary is that a dreamer has his eyes closed. And a visionary has his eyes open." So hopefully our eyes were open to new ways of seeing, new ways of exploring, cultural, gritty, whatever that may be. Hopefully we grew in our awareness. Eckhart Tolle says this. He says, awareness is the greatest agent for change. Awareness is the great agent for change. So this awareness over the last 3 to 4 weeks deepens our souls and our hearts in relationship with this person of Christ as we reimagine. Now, this is going to come up again and again and again, and this has really been the basis for our message series, taken right from her book. Not your white Jesus. The Jesus of the Gospels was actually a total badass in a countercultural, all-inclusive, anti-materialistic, radically loving kind of way. He was born to a teenage mother, fled as a refugee from an oppressive king, and amazed the most educated teachers when he was just a kid. I love that wrap-up because it's gritty. It's countercultural. It's a different Jesus than what most of us have experienced. So, in summary, the first Sunday of February, it's always good to summarize, right? I feel like a teacher today. We wrestled with this question. So, how did Jesus become white? We wrestled with that individually. We thought about that. We've realized that humankind has created a Jesus in their own image, and they have whitewashed Jesus. And we discovered that it's dangerous to attempt to create God or create Jesus or create anybody actually in our own image, right? Because when we try to create our own personal Jesus or God, we will fail every time. Now, the second Sunday in February, we tackled our consumerist, materialistic American culture, what we might call, the American dream. Take a deep breath. Oh, the American dream. Isn't that the America we want to recreate again? Back when America was great and all the white folks were fleeing for the suburbs, creating utopias of whiteness away from anybody they felt was the other in the inner city. The American dream is our white culture's idea of a successful life measured by what? The amount of material items we can stockpile before death. And I shared this really profound quote. Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. And read with me. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. We ask, is that the American dream or is that God's dream? Concluding with God's understanding, at least in my eyes, of the American dream through Jesus, who tells us true life comes from that radical generosity we see in the ways of Jesus, who always sacrificially loved others first. And finally, last week, I wasn't here, but I did get a copy of Pastor Susan's sermon. She said, "Shh, be quiet. Don't speak. Stop talking." And then she talked about her own struggle with knowing when to be silent and knowing when to speak. But she assured you that often when it comes to issues of justice and equity and equality and abuse and misuse, we must speak up. And she quoted MLK, who said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." When we fail to give voice, it means that our silence is compliance. So Pastor Susan ended her message with this quote from the book that we've been using and basing some of our thoughts on, Not Your White Jesus, with listen better, love bolder, speak out against hurt, but always in love. So where do we go from here? How do I summarize a series that I feel got to the very heart of the Christian faith and the heart of Jesus and the heart of who we are as people of God? There was a conservative white pastor, a liberal peacemaker, and Jesus, and they all walk into a bar. Who does Jesus have a beer with? The white evangelist praising Jesus' name all over town, or the social justice advocate lobbying for reform at Arizona's Capitol? Well, it's a trick question, of course, neither. Jesus has a beer with the homeless couple he just met outside and invited in. Another trick question I have, though, in the bar, would Jesus turn water into wine or wine into water? So it's not a big secret, and I say this ad nauseum, I think, in this community, because sometimes if we say things over and over, it finally gets into the fabric of who we are, that Jesus hung out with the people that were untouchables, that the religious and religions of the day looked down on. If Jesus decided to come to the United States today and to Phoenix on a Sunday morning, I'm always curious what church, what mosque, what temple, what synagogue would Jesus decide to go into to visit? I want to believe that Jesus would walk right in here. Well, we have good music. We have an energetic, diverse crowd. We're all about worshiping joyfully, and we do share our faith outside these doors, but I'm not sure. He'd probably head over to the local megachurch, mosque or temple or synagogue. I think actually he'd be with those that the church doesn't let inside its doors, that the church treats as inferior. That's kind of the white Jesus Christianity we've been talking about, that keeps those on the margins outside in the margins. One of my favorite quotes is this, by Timothy Keller. If the church does not identify with the marginalized, it will itself become marginalized. This is God's poetic justice. I think the American church, honestly, is becoming marginalized because it's focused too much inward and gazed at its navel. Because American white Christianity says everybody needs to believe and think and act the same and do it the same, or else it just ain't right. Jesus did not say that the whole world should go to church. Oh, didn't he? There were actually no churches in Jesus' day, just synagogues. So we can let ourselves off on that one. Essentially, he said that the church should go to the world. Christ would meet people exactly where they were at. That's what was unique about this brown-skinned Palestinian Jew, which is what we are called to do. He met the Samaritan woman by her watering hole. An everyday journey for this woman, possibly 2 or 3 times a day. Zacchaeus was up in a tree because he was short, overlooking the domain of his tax collection territory. And he looks up in the tree and says, Zacchaeus, I want to walk into your house today and I want to eat with you. He met with the religious crowds in their synagogues, but he interrupted their polite worship with sharp and intrusive questions. He also met those who were emotionally and physically and spiritually sick right at their bedside, right in the middle of a psychotic break. He met people right where they were at, and he addressed their greatest need and reminded them of what I like to call the God-sized hole that each of us has. Trying to fill the God-sized hole in our hearts with other things rather than God is like trying to fill the Grand Canyon with marbles. Isn't that a great quote? I think it's the 100th anniversary of the Grand Canyon, at least the park. I think the canyon's been there a lot longer, right? Yeah. But I think that's kind of an amazing statement for us here as Arizonans. Jesus met people right in the middle of their demons that they were dealing with, and he made it clear that God was with them and God was also in them through the Christ. So to the reading for today. It's from Jesus' sermon on the plain, on the desert plain. Jesus spends the night with his 12 disciples on the top of South Mountain or North Mountain or Camelback, getting energized. And I imagine he looks over the valley. He looks over Phoenix's valley. He gets some perspective and he says, wow, there's a lot of people down there that need something. They're all scattering around like little ants in their automobiles, determining what he was going to say, and when he returned to the valley. And Jesus comes down South Mountain, North Mountain, or Camelback to the south side of Phoenix, I'd like to think, because I think that's the side that Jesus would be hanging out in. And there's a large crowd of Phoenicians that gather to hear what this man is going to say. And Jesus launches into some really practical teachings here in our valley. And this is clearly a multicultural group. They're not just Phoenicians. They're people that have come from New Mexico and California, and even south of the border. And Jesus gives them the Beatitudes, which I think in many ways are a replacement, so to speak, for the 10 Commandments. He gives them real-life instructions, how you can live your life to change the world. And this is what he says. He says, you don't get wormy apples off a healthy tree, nor good apples off a diseased tree. The health of the apple tells the health of the tree. You must begin with your own life-giving lives. It's who you are, not what you say or do that counts. And listen to this, your true being brims over in true words and deeds. Your true being brims over in true words and deeds. Jesus says you don't get wormy apples off a healthy tree. You don't get good apples off a diseased tree. I guess what Jesus is saying in certain respects is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. By our fruit, you will know us. You got a healthy tree, you got healthy fruit. Keep yourself deeply rooted and grounded in God and in community. Jesus reminds us with this illustration is like, stay connected. Have deep roots. Stay connected to spiritual community. Stay connected to God. Remember who you belong to and remember who Jesus really, really is. And I want to go back to this again. The Jesus of the Gospels was a total badass in a countercultural, all-inclusive, anti-materialistic, radically loving kind of way. He's born to a teenage mother, fled as a refugee from an oppressive king, and amazed the most educated teachers when he was just a kid. That's the scrubby, gritty Jesus. Don't get trapped into recreating a mild-mannered white Jesus who just walked around the desert giving everybody the peace sign. Jesus was a radical refugee Messiah, one who can empower us to change our individual lives and then empower us to change the world around us. Diana Anderson, from the incredibly cold, snowy north, I think they had 32 inches of snow in Minnesota this last month. I can't imagine living in Minneapolis anymore. Well, she lives in Minneapolis. She has lots of time to read books because she's kind of closed in all winter. In women's studies. And this is her encouragement to the church today, and these are some of the words I'd like to leave you with this morning. Diana says, if we are to be a church that contributes meaningfully to the ongoing discourse about justice in all forms, we must be a church that celebrates, embraces, and is the marginalized. If you are fearful of becoming marginalized, you're a part of the problem. Oh, those are hard words. Those are such hard words. Jesus lived in the margins. I hope we all got that over the last few weeks. He welcomed and embraced people in the margins. And I think Jesus intentionally put himself in the margins even from the moment of his conception in the womb of an unmarried woman. He intentionally put himself in the margins as often as possible to be a part of the change that he wanted to see in our world, that God wanted to do through him in our world. And I think as we pull back the curtain on Jesus' life and we discover that Jesus knows what it's like to be marginalized, he understands how it feels to have society shove you to the side because you're a refugee, because you're poor, because you're brown, because you're homeless, because you're not accepted in the normal parts of society. And in the end, you're totally rejected. Oh, a death sentence on a cross. He can identify with people in the margins, with life in the margins, because when Jesus came to earth, he landed in the margins on purpose. And he chose to land there because it's in the margins that, guess what? Broken lives get mended. That prisoners are set free. That the poor hear the good news that there's something more to life than stuff. So I welcome you to the crowded margins of life. You know, the majority of our planet lives in the margins. Hopefully we continue to meet this brown-skinned Palestinian Jew in the margins. He waits for us to embrace us in our marginalization and in our margin, whatever that may be, because we're all a part of the margins in one way or another. So final closing thought. This is from GodStillSpeaks.com. Sounds like the UCC, God Still Speaking. And it says, what if we focused on going to Jesus instead of going to church? Oh, now that's kind of novel. And I hope we aren't empty next Sunday, because I've encouraged you to go directly to Jesus. But I think it's focusing on the reality of Jesus and the true Jesus, and not the Jesus we've fabricated, but the Jesus that challenges us to be transformed and be changed, and then to be transformation, agents of transformation and change in our world. So please rise as you are able, and let us join together in